I should be doing coursework right now, but tomorrow night, it's election night, and I am having a hard time focusing because it's election night. So I thought that I would just put a few thoughts down and just kind of put them out there and just kind of have the opportunity to share just a little bit. Because the positive thing about any time that we can make an election of our own, a choice of our own, is that we can feel empowered. But the truth is that sometimes when an election or a choice occurs in the world, it can be difficult to distance ourselves from the stress that happens in the world itself. There's a lot of stress out there in the world. There's a lot of emotion in the world. And in that stress and emotion, we have to find a way to navigate our way through this world. So, how do we deal with that stress and that emotion? How do we know if we're responding or if we're reacting? If that's something that matters to us as a person, that knowing that difference between responding and reacting, then that can be something that can empower us when we know what's happening in our lives, when we know what's happening in our relationship, and we know what's happening in our own internal experience when we are faced with the stress or the choice or the emotion that's out there in the world. So, when we're out there in the world, whether we're paying attention to the news or we're talking with someone at a coffee shop or we're dealing with a relative, there is the perspective of the world itself. The perspective of the world creates a kind of frame that the world provides for each of us in our lives. That frame is made up of the expectations of the world for us individually as well as communally. Can also be made up of not only the expectations, but also the social structures that the world happens to hold of value. Depending upon which aspect of the world you happen to be engaging, that frame can change. So for instance, the frame in Yellowstone National Park, where I used to live, was a very different frame than the frame of Minneapolis, Minnesota. A different context, different community, different frame, different values. So that perspective of the world is framed not only by the structures and institutions within that world, but also all of the people that make up that institution, all of the beliefs that they as a community, as an organization, hold of value. Similarly, the frame of the world is also experienced by how we experience that frame of the world. So there's the frame of the world that we experience when we turn on a particular news channel, or a different frame that we experience when we happen to turn on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That changes our frame of the world. Now, that frame of the world is only one part of the equation, because we are not the world. Even though whatever the song might say, we are not the world. We are not that organization that holds that frame or that perspective for the world in which we happen to walk. So we have our own frame, our own perspective, our experience, our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, our experiences, all of which make up our own personal frame, which we hold, that is made up of what we value. Now, that personal frame that we have, that perspective that we have, is made up not only of the experiences that we endure, it's also made up of those beliefs, attitudes, thoughts that sometimes may be holding us back. It may be a thought or a belief that may have served some purpose once upon a time. But now, it may not do us service. But we hold on to it because it was part of our experience, part of our frame. And sometimes when those beliefs or those thoughts become unconscious, we just do them normally. We can sometimes be hindered by what we think. So, if that's part of our personal perspective, our personal frame, then it would make sense that if our frame is comprised of beliefs or thoughts or attitudes that may not serve us well, that can give fuel to the reaction that we have to what's happening in the world versus a response to what we experience. So what is our perspective? What frames our life? Those are important questions, I believe. Those are questions that can give us a sense of power and a sense of wholeness in this world, because we have no control over the frame of the world, the perspective that the world holds. We are in the world, whether we like it or not. But our own perspective, our own frame, what frames our life, defined by the things that we value, what we hold dear, and what we know can serve us truly, that can give us the power and the strength and the confidence to respond to what happens in the world, to step into our life, to truly fill our purpose and our calling. So those are my thoughts on this night before Election Day. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm really glad you joined me. Thanks.